Gloria and welcome back to another video. It's been a minute. Let's just say August was a busy month for me, both socially, but also our house was under renovation, so I couldn't film and I worked a lot. It was kind of my last month before baby gets here to like plan my life and figure stuff out, so it was a crazy one and I didn't film very much, which made me sad, but that did not stop me from reading, let me tell you, because I have 22 or 23 books to talk about with you today. This is my August wrap up, all of the books that I got, started, finished, liked, didn't like in the month of August. It was a very eclectic month. I read a lot of different kinds of things. A few I liked, some were wins, some were not so much, as it typically goes for me. And I'm gonna kick off this wrap up with a positive note, because that's not usually how it's been in my recent reading. I'm gonna start with an almost 5-star book. It was an excellent read and it just recently came out. I would highly encourage you to pick it up. That is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. This is her second novel. Miracle Creek got a lot of buzz when it came out a few years back, and I went blindly into this one and I really enjoyed my time. This is like a contemporary mystery literary family story. I think on the lines of Celeste Ng, I would compare, of like a deep dive into a family, but Angie Kim just works for me versus Celeste Ng's books just haven't before in the past. I think why I really connected this one is the voice and the narrator of the story. This overanalyzing, very intelligent girl in her 20s breaking down what's going on around her and her thought process and how she's trying to figure out this family mystery that's going on of her dad is missing and what's happening behind the scenes with her autistic brother. And it was just so well done, truly well written. I don't feel like I'm qualified enough to analyze whether a book is well written or not, but this one felt like it was. Like while I was reading, I was like, this is a good book, this is good writing. I would say maybe in some parts why it wasn't quite 5 stars is it did get overly analytical. Like this girl was breaking stuff down so much, like there's a ton of footnotes, so it was actually kind of annoying to read on Kindle. I read the advanced reader copy version from NetGalley, and I'm curious how the footnotes would work in an audiobook. But all that aside, this was an excellent read. It kept me on the edge of my seat in a very great way, in like not overly action-packed way. The main drama of the book took place in about 3 days, but there were flashbacks to the past which were really interesting, and again just so well done. Angie Kim does it again. I am definitely keeping my eye out for what she comes out with in the future because I just really connected with this one, which was such a win for me. I'm so glad I liked a book. I'm gonna keep the positive train going and I'm gonna talk about Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I understand the hype. This book is so beloved this year because of the Women's Prize and the Pulitzer Prize, I think, and the BookTube Prize. I don't know, but this book is getting all the prizes and all the love, and I think rightfully so. This is also really well done and really well written. Not quite 5 stars for me. This book definitely was like a 4-star read. It was a great read and I enjoyed my time with it, because it's a hard read. What I loved that this author did was make me care so much for a character with all of my might, and I was rooting for him so much to succeed in life, despite all of the circumstances and all the things that are going against him. This is a book filled with lots of trauma and all the trigger warnings. This is a coming of age story about a poor boy in the Appalachia area and growing up with family dysfunction and abuse and in the foster care system and with alcohol and drug abuse and just all the cards stacked against him. But it also had a thread of hope, which is so important for me with really sad and depressing books like this. There needs to be hope, and I think because the voice was overall reflective, like the narrative story was a reflective one of looking back into my life, into my past and what I experienced, that voice helped me get through the really hard parts, the hopeless and depressing parts to read about. Because of that narration, I knew that he made it out in the end, that he was okay, and that he's able to look back at his life and tell the story. The main 2 things that I didn't love as much was, one, I felt like the ending was very rushed. This whole story of just like turmoil, and then in the end it all just gets wrapped up and like, oh, okay, that's how you got better in the end that fast. And then I'll just echo a point that my friend made. It's like, how did Barbara Kingsolver, who is this middle-aged white lady, get into the voice of a young boy growing up in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and like the horny teenage boy humor? Like there's a ton of just like very crude boy mind thoughts in here about just sex and just all of the things that boys think about that I don't want to really read about. But it was very much in this book all over the place all the time, and to be fair, it wasn't so over the top done that it like pulled me out of the story, because it felt very true to who this character was and what he was going through. But it is just funny to think about, like, what kind of research as an author did you have to do? Did you interview teenage boys, or like how do you get in the mind space of thinking about the things that boys think about? Because yeah, all of that was in here. But an excellent read. I get the hype. I totally understand why it's so well loved. Moving right along, I picked up another hyped book, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a young adult romance historical fantasy that's getting a lot of praise and love. I know Miriam Elizabeth Reed's really enjoyed it, and a ton of other booktubers really love it, who regularly read fantasy, shall I say. And this book landed on 3-ish stars for me. Overall, enjoyed my time with it. Not a bad book at all, but I didn't love it. And the main parts I didn't love was the fantasy. I really enjoyed the characters and the way that they talked to each other and the romance that was developing. But I didn't care for this whole world that's supposed to be like these gods that are at war with each other. I just didn't buy that. This book very much evokes a World War I England setting, and I just wish that was it. Like, I just wish this was set during the war in England, in the real world, and just like that the weird god war had nothing to do with it, because I was like, eh. The magical element that I enjoyed was this couple writing letters back and forth to each other in kind of a mysterious magical way. That was fun and fine. But yeah, I just couldn't really buy like the setting and the why of like the main big why of what's happening to the characters around them. This war between the gods. I was just like, this is stupid. I just wish that wasn't the case, but that could definitely just be a me thing. Another just regular old historical fiction, no fantasy involved, that I read in August is Go as a River by Shelley Reed. This one I mainly picked up because I know one of you guys recommended it to me in the comments, and I also follow Megan's book club on Instagram, and she gave this 5 stars. And I don't know why I take her recommendations, because I don't think our reading tastes quite align, but for some reason I was just like, I want to read this, why not? This historical fiction kicks off in the 1960s in Colorado, and it stays in Colorado, but it spans many years, and it follows one main woman. She starts as a 17-year-old girl who falls in love, gets pregnant, and has to give up her baby and then live with that. And nothing really happens. She's just kind of sad and depressed, and things are kind of falling apart around her in her hometown, and she befriends certain characters that aren't totally fleshed out, and then there's a reunion in the end, and that's just kind of it. And I was mostly just quite bored with this one. It didn't work for me. I wasn't invested or cared very much at all. I definitely should have DNF'd or not finished this one, but I just chugged along because it was a shorter audiobook. But yeah, this one was a 2-star read for me. Not my favorite. Another 2-star read for me, out of my comfort zone. I picked it up on the last day of August because this was a 4-hour audiobook, and my in-person library book club where I work, we are reading this book and discussing it in a week. So I figured, oh, I could totally squeeze that in. I kind of already knew it wasn't going to be my kind of book, but I was like, the book club's reading it, so I'll give it a try. And I know that Amanda from the Curly Reader really enjoyed it, but that didn't mean that I was going to, and I was right. I didn't. All that to say, I'm talking about The Swimmers by Julie Otsuka. This is your typical literary fiction where I finished the book and I'm thinking, what did I just read? Like, what was the point of that? It was so random thoughts, random things put together. Mainly, this book is telling you that this is going to be about people who are in a community swimming pool, and that is like the first tiny part of the book. The main part of the book is about dementia and a woman that gets dementia, but not really about her either, because it's not about a character. It's not really about anything. Like, I didn't understand this book and I really didn't like it, but it was very short, so I got through it, but I was like, that was a waste of my life. Another book that didn't work for me is The Honeymoon Crashers by Christina Lauren. This was a short audiobook that I got through Libro FM through the influencer program, and I picked this up because I read The Unhoneymooners a couple months back, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just read this. Like, why not? This is kind of like a short romance novella, which is, I think, is like a trend now happening with these authors that are writing rom-coms, and yeah, just not my kind of thing. And I should really put that in my head and be like, not worth trying in the future. All right, keeping the negativity train rolling, a book that I did not finish, but I think it was definitely a me problem because I recognize themes in this book that are just not my kind of book, but probably is a very interesting story and could really work well for others, and is working well for others because it is getting a lot of praise and love. I'm talking about Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenya. This one's also getting quite a bit of buzz this year, and that is because this is supposed to be like an adult science fiction Hunger Games where our prison system in America is on TV, and basically for entertainment there's like blood sport of these prisoners having to kill each other. And if you are the ultimate winner, kill a bunch of people and serve a certain amount of time and move up in the ranks, then you can eventually be free. A really interesting premise. That's why I picked it up in the first place. But then, and I should have known, it's just way too grim, too gritty, too dark, too violent. All of those words that are very anti-buzzwords for me in books just doesn't really work. I felt very uncomfortable reading this, and I think for good reason, but I think in my headspace and where I'm at, just not my kind of read. I can't go there. It just felt quite hopeless and brutal, and I was like, I don't want to sit in this. The sun is setting. I'm going to try to pick it up. But another book that I finished on NetGalley in advance of its publication date coming out in September is a very anticipated middle grade by Kate Albus, and that is Nothing Else But Miracles. I loved A Place to Hang the Moon. I read that last year for middle grade March in a reading vlog and really enjoyed that historical fiction set during the war. And this one is also set during the war, but it's set in New York City. And I didn't quite love this one, gave it 4 stars, but it was a solid read, a great middle grade. The thing that Kate Albus just does exquisitely is sibling dynamics. This is another book that is a set of 3 siblings, and they are excellent characters, like just perfect to root for. I love them as a family unit and all the little escapades that they got to. My main issue with this book was nothing really happened. Like, there was no really plot or excitement in the story. The main thing is that the father of this family has to go to war, and the oldest brother, who's 17, has to take care of his siblings, and it's just kind of a summer in New York City as they're waiting to hear back from their father. Basically have to deal with trying to figure out a living situation. It was very sweet and feel good, and like I said, the sibling dynamics were excellent. So I will definitely be reading more Kate Albus, and I would definitely recommend for middle grade historical fiction fans. Another middle grade that I picked up in August that I'm a little late to the game for, this one was read years ago and is very well loved in the middle grade community, and that is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is a contemporary middle grade about a young boy who has can't say it, but basically he's born with some deformities in his face and has to have corrective surgery with cleft palate and ears and like eyes drooping and stuff like that. And he's this like ugly deformed boy who has to go to middle school for the first time and has to deal with making friends and dealing with bullies and his family and sibling dynamics. And it was also very sweet, well done. I gave it 4 stars. I liked my time overall. I just have a hard time loving contemporary middle grades. Like, a lot of them are really great reads, and I totally understand why they're loved and recommended to young readers and all of that, but as an adult reader there's a slight disconnect. I thought this one was well done, and I'm intrigued to maybe try the movie. Since that was middle grade, I'll transition to graphic novels because I have a couple middle grade ones, and this next one is actually by the same author, R.J. Palacio, Whitebird. This was a recommended graphic novel by one of you guys, and that's actually why I started reading this, and then I wanted to read Wonder because they're connected, kind of. But this is a World War II historical fiction graphic novel about a young boy's grandma who's retelling her time during the war in France. And overall the main story is this grandma as a young girl and how she was hidden by her friend and like survived the war. It was a great graphic novel. I really enjoyed it overall. I think the ending was super random. Like, there was literally 2 pages that added to the end that didn't really make sense to me. Like, why is that included? But besides that, a great graphic novel depicting the time in France during the war. Then I picked up Bear by Ben Queen and Joe Todd Stanton. This one had some fun illustrations and an illustration style that I really liked in terms of like the color palette and the coloring and cartooning of everything, but the story didn't really make sense to me. This one I gave 2 stars. It was just so disjointed and random, and like the dialogue didn't make sense. This dog, who is a service dog for a blind man, gets lost and then has like nightmares and stuff and like tries to find its way home, and the journey was just really random, and I didn't love how any of that was depicted. I liked the art, I liked the premise, I didn't like the execution. Another one called Bear by Stefan Nospelius I picked up because of Heather from Reading with Vengeance. I saw that she gave this quite a high rating. This is a completely wordless graphic novel, completely in black and white. Not my favorite for graphic novels. Very much like pencil, kind of messy drawing. I couldn't really tell you what the plot was, but I think it's about friendship, but it wasn't my favorite illustration style, and that's kind of like the main thing I love about graphic novels. So, and then I picked up Salt Magic by Hope Larson and Rebecca Mock. I did quite like the illustration style of this one, a lot more closer to like comic kind of illustration style, but I like the colors. This one is a fantastical, kind of creepy, gothic, magical story about a young girl that is fighting like this evil witch to save her family, and it was a little bit just too kind of creepy and off for my personal taste as far as graphic novels go, but I totally could see why some readers would love this kind of spooky, creepy graphic novel, especially in this upcoming season. Before I end with some picture books, I'm going to mention 3 nonfictions that I read. First one being Fly Girl by Anne Hood. Picked this up because of Lena's bookshelf. She mentioned reading this in a vlog, and this felt like a really summery read. This is basically a behind-the-scenes look of a woman who was a flight attendant during like the glory times of flying in the 60s and 70s, and it was really interesting. I would say this is definitely for people who want a behind-the-scenes look of like the flight attendant life, and also just have like a bug for traveling and love to travel, because this kind of made me reminisce on my travel adventures. but overall this is more of like little short stories and anecdotes and random things that she noticed from her time being a flight attendant, and it was a solid read for me. I gave 4 stars. Next, I picked up An Immense World by Ed Young. This was on my radar because I love nature documentaries on like Netflix, BBC, Planet Earth, anything narrated by David Attenborough. Love all of those documentaries, and I figured this was gonna be like that but in book form, and it kind of was, but this just didn't quite work for me, and maybe I was just too distracted, and I'm just in that stage of life where I can't like focus on this much science. But this was so over the top to me, like nitty-gritty scientific detail about animal senses. There were definitely some interesting parts and some interesting animals I learned about, but I just felt like it could have been edited down to maybe more of a main point. I don't know, it just felt like long and just too much information, and like, did I recall any of it? No. But it wasn't a bad read, it just was inaccessible to me. This just wasn't like a riveting 5-star nature book to me. It was just very science heavy. Like, this felt more textbook to me than narrative nonfiction. But so many people love it that it could have totally just been a me thing and my mind at the stage that I'm in thing. Finally, for nonfiction, I mentioned in a few of my wrap-ups this year that I'm in a cookbook book club where we pick a cookbook every month and a group of people get together, pick some recipes, cook them, go over it. And the book for August is Pulp, A Practical Guide to Cooking with Fruit by Abra Behrens. This is her 3rd cookbook, I believe. This is a book all about fruit, and it focused on different kinds of fruit, and there was a sweet recipe, a savory recipe, a grilled recipe, and then how to like jam and preserve the fruit. And this is also like a very thick cookbook that I imagine some people would totally love and just have on their shelves as a reference whenever they're cooking with fruit. And I love fruit. The thing is, I was skeptical about this one because I don't love savory things being sweet. Like, I don't love fruit in my savory things. I don't love like honey glazed ham. Some American foods that I'm like, it's really weird, like sweet potatoes, casserole stuff. No, absolutely not. I'm like savory all the way. It has to be salty, vinegary, spicy, like all of that kind of thing. So anyways, I was like cooking with fruit. I don't know if it's my jam, but I did the blackberry peach cobbler recipe in here, and it was delicious. And I was surprised by like a grilled cherry couscous pork dish that was really good, and there was a good salad too. The recipes that were made from this book were really nice. So overall, I liked it. It definitely took me out of my comfort zone in trying different foods. I picked an easy one. I just made something sweet with fruit, but that is the fruit I had on hand. I'm obsessed with peaches at the moment. I literally eat them every single day. I love being pregnant in the summer because I can just eat all the fruit. Anywho's, would recommend for fruit lovers that want to branch out and try new things with fruit. And lastly, let me briefly end with my stack of picture books. I picked up The Farmer by Zimo Abadia. This one has some very fun and quirky illustrations. Love the color palette, very like primary colors, but the story was also kind of lacking. It just didn't really have much to say. It was a fun little quirky one, a 3-star picture book in my mind. This one was so beautiful. Drawn from Nature by Helen Apornsiri. This is a new favorite artist of mine. I'm so glad I discovered her. This book has some foiling, which you can't tell because of the lighting, but every single thing in here is made from dry pressed flowers that she actually dried and pressed by hand to make the artwork in here. You can't really tell from the camera because it just looks like illustration, but all of this is just dried plants and nature and flowers that she kind of creates animals out of, and it was stunning, just absolutely beautiful to read. And this is also a very seasonal, naturey, beautiful read in whatever season you're in. I looked up the author, and she's from the UK, and there is this gorgeous bunny tote that I now want. And I actually saw in my Barnes & Noble a notebook with the bunny on it. So this author and artist, link down below as always, would highly recommend for those that love nature and like pressed flowers and that kind of naturey artwork, because this was beautiful. I picked up Yellow Kayak by Nina Layden and Melissa Castrillin. This is an illustrator that I read from a few months back, and I really liked her illustration style, and this book also has some beautiful illustrations in it. Loved the color palette and like the bright colors with like kind of the muted pastel-y tones as well. This one was so fun. It's all about like underwater magical mystical adventure, and this was a very cute picture book. Would recommend. Another one that I liked the illustration style, the cover is what got me to pick it up. Once There Was by Corinne Demlas and Gemma Capdevila. This one was also very magical, mystical, fantastical, beautiful illustrations, but the story definitely lacked for me. It was one of those like repetitive ones where it repeats in the beginning and then just something gets added on and added on and added on, and then in the end it's the same thing. I know that it's like a form of picture books, and I know that kids love that because it's repetition, but for me as an adult reader, I'm like, gosh, this is so boring. I just like other kind of storytelling when it comes to this kind of thing, but the illustration style was beautiful. Another illustration style that I really liked was Tell Me a Story, Babushka by Carola Schmidt and Anita Bergiani. This had some very cute illustration, very like animated Disney, I don't know, anime style. I don't know how to describe that, but love the illustration. The story lacked for me because it felt too short, and like also no point was made. It was trying to tell the story of a young girl in Ukraine during the Holodomor, but there were really no details unpacked at all. It just mostly was like really pretty illustration style with not a totally extrapolated story. It wasn't simple enough, but wasn't complicated enough. One that came recommended by Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes was Evergreen by Matthew Cradell. It is about this little scared squirrel that needs to deliver some soup to her grandmother, and she's afraid of the forest, but she needs to go on this quest, and so she does, and she encounters many animals and many things that make her face her fears, and it was just very cute. Not my favorite illustration style ever, but the story was really fun. So this one is where like the story really made up for what was lacking to me in like color and pop and that kind of thing. But this was a fun one. I would definitely recommend picking up for this fall season. And a favorite that was recommended by my sister was Tea Party Today, Poems to Sip and Savor by Aline Spinelli and Karen Dugan. This was an older picture book published in 1999. The poems in here were so cute, so well done. I love the rhyming schemes and little like tips of how to have tea. This is a tea lover's dream kind of book. This will make you want to have a tea party and just learn about tea drinking and tea making, and it's so sweet. I would definitely own this one on my shelves and have a tea party with my son one day. So this was a long one. Thanks for sticking through. I had a lot of books to cover in the month of August. I'm sorry I've been absent. I have some fun ideas for September. We'll see though, because I'm only like 3 weeks away from the due date, so I don't know what's gonna happen, but I have some fun videos planned and I hope that I can get them done. I'm officially kind of off work for the next couple weeks, and I hope to do some pre-filming and kind of like nestle in at home here. I really miss interacting with all of you guys, so hopefully you'll see my face around here more often than not. But thank you so much for watching today. As always, please let me know what you thought of any of those reads. If any books have intrigued you and you want to pick them up, or if you had similar thoughts or disagree with me, anything is welcome down below. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you guys in another video soon. Bye.